Hi everyone, welcome to another video. In the last video we looked at how increasing the amount of love you have within your sport might actually directly improve your performance. That is love for teammates, love for your sport, love for even your opponents, and love for yourself. Love for yourself seems like a bit of a strange concept. What we're talking about there obviously is self-compassion. But then the question is, well, as athletes, how much self-compassion do we want? I mean, surely being an athlete is about being tough and rugged and able to push through and, live in your pain cave, and we associate all of these strong words with performance. Surely the idea of self-compassion, which is just being kind to yourself, seems a bit weak. How's that going to improve your performance? Well, let's think about that a little bit more this week. So let's do a little task. I'm going to just go through 4 statements and I want you to think about whether you agree or disagree with them. So number 1, so self-compassion is soft. So self-compassion is soft. Agree or disagree? Number 2, self-compassion undermines motivation to work hard and improve yourself. So do you think self-compassion undermines motivation? Number 3, self-compassion is self-indulgent. Do you agree or disagree with that? And what about the final one? Athletes need self-esteem, not self-compassion. So you've made a mental list or a little tick list of those as to which you think. So let's go through those one at a time. So self-compassion is soft. And as I was saying before, there might be legitimate reasons why that would seem to be the case. However, there are studies that look at military veterans who served on the front line in war zones across the world, and what they find is that those veterans who have the greatest levels of self-compassion are also the ones that struggle less with symptoms of PTSD after their time serving. So what we see is self-compassion builds robustness. So it's actually the opposite. Self-compassion isn't soft. Self-compassion builds robustness, bounce back ability, maybe a level of sort of stoicism and the ability to just get through tough things. As an athlete, that seems like something that you would want. Number 2, so self-compassion undermines motivation to work hard and improve yourself. Well, let's think of the opposite. So self-compassion is kindness, so the opposite of kindness is just being mean and self-critical. So if we're mean and self-critical to ourselves, is that a good motivator? Well, it can be. But research shows again that a more kind, compassionate view of ourselves is more motivating than that critical view of ourselves, that critical approach. And the reason for that is because the critical approach drives fear, and like we said in the last video, that increase in fear increases cortisol levels, a stress hormone, and we know that that decreases performance. We want to release ourselves from that fear, and being more self-compassionate does that. Number 3, self-compassionate is self-indulgent. Well, we need to make a differentiation here. We're not talking about self-gratification. We're talking about self-compassion. So we're not talking about just having whatever you want, as much as you want it, all the time. We're talking about looking after our emotional well-being and making sure that the decisions we make keep us emotionally on top as we can possibly be. So it's not I'll eat all of the ice cream all of the time. It's no, I'm not going to have that treat right now. I'm going to wait until it's appropriate within my training plan and then have that, because I know that emotionally that's going to leave me in a better place. Lastly, athletes need self-esteem and not self-compassion. This one's a little bit more tricky because athletes do need self-esteem. The issue is, how do we maintain our levels of higher levels of self-esteem. And the problem is that as athletes, we often base our self-esteem on other people and other athletes. We compare ourselves to other people all of the time. And if we do that, it's quite likely that in any particular area, there'll be someone who's doing a little bit better than us. And so our self-esteem can constantly take a knock if we compare ourselves to other people to get our self-esteem. So it's much better to base our levels of self-esteem on self-compassion, being kinder to ourselves, to see ourselves more positively, to increase our self-esteem, and athletes with higher levels of self-esteem perform better. So there are those 4 points, and I want to just leave you with that and ask you, maybe in the next week, how are you going to show yourself a little bit more self-compassion to increase the love in your sport, to increase your performance? I hope you found that helpful. Please post any comments below, and we'll be back with another video very soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye. So one more thing to say that I forgot to say in the main video was the last video on love in sport and this video on self-compassion in sport were very, very heavily borrowed from a workshop delivered by the True Athlete Project. It's a really great project that looks after the mental well-being of young athletes across the world, and you can find out more by looking at trueathleteproject.org. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.